Between the 9th and 14th century, the Ghana Empire was one of the most prominent and prosperous empires in the world. The Ghana Empire, which is not to be confused with the present-day country of Ghana, founded in 1957 and located further south on the map, had its territory in Western Africa in what would span from modern-day southeast Mauritania to western Mali. The Ghana Empire, also known as Ouagadougou, drove its prosperity from trade and exports of metals like copper and gold, which transited across the Sahara to northern Africa and Europe. Ghana was the title given to the rulers of the kingdom, and according to medieval geographer Ibn Akwal, Ghana was the wealthiest king on the face of the earth because of his treasures and stocks of gold extracted in olden times. The city of Kumbi Saleh, which belonged in the Ghana Empire and is reputed to have been its capital, was one of the most prosperous and most populated cities of the time. In comparison, in the 10th century, London had an estimated population of less than 12,000 souls, while Kumbi Saleh had a population estimated to reach 20,000 people, which was more than most European cities at the time. According to al-Bahri, an Andalusian historian and prominent medieval geographer, the major part of the city was called Al-Gaba and was the residence of the king. It was protected by a stone wall and functioned as the royal and spiritual capital of the empire. It contained a sacred grove of trees in which priests lived. It also contained the king's palace, the grandest structure in the city, surrounded by other domed buildings. There was also one mosque for visiting Muslim officials. The name of the other section of the city is not recorded. In the vicinity were wells with fresh water used to grow vegetables. It was inhabited almost entirely by Muslims, who had 12 mosques, one of which was designated for Friday prayers and had a full group of scholars, scribes, and Islamic jurists. Because the majority of these Muslims were merchants, this part of the city is reputed to have been its primary business district. When we think of medieval times, we really think of Africa and the role African empires played at the time, and there are multiple reasons to explain the phenomenon. Before the 13th century and Marco Polo's travels to the east, most European historians and geographers had very limited knowledge of the lands beyond Christendom. Almost all of the medieval geographers that traveled to the south were Muslim scholars like al-Bahri, al-Khwarizmi, and Muhammad al-Idrisi. In 1154, Muhammad al-Idrisi created the most accurate map of the world in pre-modern times, the Kitab Nushat al-Mushtaq, also known as the Tabula Rogeriana. He compiled in his map accounts from Islamic merchants and European voyagers to form a view of the world that extended from Greenland to the far east regions of China, and that 300 years before Christopher Columbus's first voyage to America. In his map of the world, al-Idrisi points to the location of Ard Ghana, or the territory of Ghana, in what is today accepted as the official location of the medieval empire. Unfortunately, Muhammad al-Idrisi's work remained largely unknown in Western Europe, and it's not until the 19th century and the colonial occupation of the region by the French that accounts of the medieval empire resurface again. Several French colonial officials take interest in the local accounts of a former ancient empire in the region. Among those, Maurice de la Fosse takes a keen interest in the study of ancient West Africa's history, and he delivers in his publications a portrait of the ancient empire of Ghana, tainted with his own biases towards African cultures and civilizations. He takes much liberty with his own interpretation of the ancient empire's origins and attributes a North African white Semitic descent to the rulers of Ghana. De la Fosse was mainly a product of his time, and in the European societies of his era, there were many fierce debates as to whether or not Negro nations ever ascended to a state of civilization in their societies. These debates were occurring at the exact same time as Europeans were expanding their colonial grip on sub-Saharan Africa and seizing its resources. We know that scientific discoveries and research advances rarely happen in a vacuum, and that is precisely what explains how the portrait that was made by European ethnologists of the African empire were mostly skewed, partial, and incomplete. Another difficulty to contend with was also the limited number of written accounts, most manuscripts about the empire being written in Arabic and only accessible to Arabic polyglots like Maurice de la Fosse. The advent of archaeological research brings a new light to the history of the ancient empire. Beginning in 1914, the site of Kumbi Saleh, the capital of the former empire, is excavated and studied. French archaeologists Paul Thomaset and Raymond Mani, who excavated the site between 1949 and 1951, give the following account of their findings. The houses were constructed from local stone, using banco rather than mortar. From the quantity of debris, it is likely that some of the buildings had more than one story. The rooms were quite narrow, probably due to the absence of large trees to provide long rafters to support the ceilings. The houses were densely packed together and separated by narrow streets. In contrast, a wide avenue up to 12 meters in width ran in east-west direction from the town. At the western end lay an open site that was probably used as a marketplace. The main mosque was centrally placed on the avenue. It measured approximately 46 meters east to west and 23 north to south. The western end was probably open to the sky, and the mihrab faced due east. The upper section of the town covered an area of 700 meters by 700 meters. To the southwest lay a lower area, 500 meters by 700 meters, that would have been occupied by less permanent structures and the occasional stone building. There were two large cemeteries outside the town, suggesting that the site was occupied over an extended period. Radiocarbon dating of charcoal fragments from a house near the mosque have given dates that range between the late 9th century to the 14th century. The Empire of Ghana had a tremendous influence on the economy, commerce, and politics of the medieval world, especially the North African and Mediterranean regions, where most of the global trade transited at the time. And it continues to fascinate. In 2021, Canadian artist Ekow Nimako builds a 100,000 black Lego bricks futuristic rendering of the city of Kumbi Saleh. The masterpiece is an utopian vision of sub-Saharan Africa 1,000 years in the future. There is still much to be discovered about the Empire of Ghana, its history, its people, and its customs. One hopes that there will be more studies, archaeological research, and traditional accounts collected to paint an even more vivid portrait of this fascinating African empire.